Luke chapter 20, verse 45. We want to begin, apparently, it's a different discussion here. Maybe they've moved locations now. We discussed last week the prior verses there, beginning in verse 41. Jesus is going to ask them a question. How is it that people say that 45? Then in the audience of all the people, Jesus said unto his disciples, "You disciples, beware of the scribes which desire to walk in long robes, scribes which will show that they make long prayers. These scribes shall receive greater damnation." So notice in verse 45, Jesus is going to turn his attention now to his followers. But he's going to say to his followers there, his disciples, in the hearing of different people. Apparently there were some of his followers weren't there. There were some of his followers there. There were other folks there who were interested, who were maybe still the scribes and the Pharisees. Maybe some of the Sadducees are still there. He dealt with the Sadducees back in the middle of Luke chapter 20. But he's turned his attention now to his followers in the hearing of everyone. He's going to give his followers here some instructions. He's going to give his followers here some a warning concerning the scribe. Now, who's a scribe, or what is a scribe? What's a scribe?
They work with the law. I won't say interprets the law.
Okay. So someone, a scribe came to Jesus in Matthew chapter 22, 35. It says that he was a lawyer. A lawyer came to ask him a question. What was the greatest commandment in the old law? Who was going to say something over here? Somebody? Dandy? Nobody? Yeah, but a scribe was someone who knew the law. Why do they need the scribe? Didn't they all have a copy of the old law? No. Could they all read and write? Not. They certainly didn't have a copy of what we call the New Testament today and the Old Testament today. I've said many times we have a very distinct advantage over people during even the time of Christ. We have a copy of the Gospel of Christ. We've got several copies at home, different versions of it. We can all read and write. We don't need a scribe today. And I'm not talking about Andy, but do we actually have to have a preacher today? Maybe some folks do, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing, but we can read this and understand it for ourselves if we would just do that. But he's gonna give them a warning about these scribes. These are the people who knew the old law. They were the teachers of the old law. If I'm living back at that time, I'm not a scribe. I can't read and write. I'm depending on the scribe now to tell me what the old law teaches. And so that has given them an elevated position, maybe, in the eyes of some of these folks. And some of these scribes, they like that. I'm a scribe, and I know a whole lot more than y'all know. I can read and write, and I've read this, and I've studied it, and I've even copied it. They didn't print this thing out on copying machines, the old law back then. Someone had to write it out. If you wanted a copy of the old law, somebody had to write it out for you. And so these folks had, in their minds and in the minds of the people, they had an elevated position of authority. Notice what he's going to warn them about now in verse 46. Beware of these scribes. They want to walk in long robes. To beware of somebody means to what? Use caution around them. Be careful when you're around them. Be aware of who these people really are. These folks think that they're somebody special, and they wanted to be treated like somebody special. And so you need to sort of take notice of who these folks, who they really are. And we're going to go to Matthew chapter 23 here in just a few minutes. Jesus there, he includes the scribes and the Pharisees there. Luke chapter 20, this is sort of a mini version of what Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 23. And Jesus calls them in Matthew 23, the scribes and the Pharisees, hypocrites, 7 or 8 times. I done forgot how many times he refers to these people as being hypocrites. But notice what he says about them here. These scribes want to walk around in long robes. Well, they're modest, I guess. What's wrong with that? What'd be
A
wrong?
lot of that will be brought up in chapter 21 before we get there about the lady in the night.
Okay.
We'll look at that again in 21.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Notice Numbers chapter 15. These long robes, and you know, when I think about people who lived back then because of the pictures that we have today, the drawings that we have today, we picture them in long robes. At least the robe, their clothing is at least down below their knee and their ankle, maybe down to their ankles. I don't know, but we picture them. I picture them in long robes. They didn't wear pants like we wear today. Notice Numbers chapter 15. What the Lord told Moses to tell the nation of Israel. Numbers chapter 15, verse 37, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Moses, speak unto the children of Israel, and tell them that they make fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. Moses, verse 39, it shall be unto you for a fringe. Notice the reason for that, that you may look upon that fringe and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them. And that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go. Verse 40, that you can remember to do all my commandments and be holy unto your God when you look at the fringe. What does that have to do with these scribes now wanting to wear the long robe? Well, do what? It's a symbol, yes, of somebody. And what was that symbol? The fringe? Well, what was the symbol that they would put fringes on their garments? This fringe to me David was always what we would call a tassel. Some commentators, it is a twisted thread. It was to be blue in color. And when folks saw that fringe on other folks' garments, when I see Burnell, he showed up this morning with his long robe. He's got the fringe on. That fringe is to remind me of God's commandments. They were reminded apparently on a daily basis. These scribes like to look. I need a longer fringe on mine coat. My fringe is longer, and my fringe is newer. No, notice something. And this is me now. This has come to my little brain. Matthew chapter 9. Remember the woman who was sick, and she thought that if she could just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, that'd make her well. Touching the hem of his garment may have more importance to her than it does to us today. Matthew chapter 9 and verse 20. Behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind Jesus and touched the hem of his garment. For she said that within herself, if I but I touch his garment, I shall be made whole. Why wouldn't she just touch the sleeve? I'll get down on the ground and I'm going to try to touch the hem of his garment. Just touch his sleeve.
And more cultural significance
Okay.
of the garment based on Jewish culture,
Yeah.
tradition, and command.
Do I not?
I think it's humility too.
Okay, it could have been. Would Jesus have worn these fringes?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. And that fringe reminded them of something. And I'm putting something here that may not have been here. Go to Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14. Jesus is in a foreign country. Matthew chapter 14, verse where is it at? 34. And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of Jesus, they sent out into all that country round about, and they brought unto him all that were diseased. And they besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garments, that they may be touched, that were made perfectly whole. Possibly, and this is just me, he had these fringes on his garments, and that was important to them. They recognized that fringe as being something that the God had commanded them to have on the hem of their garment. And if I can just touch the hem of that garment that God ordained there, it's going to have a special meaning to me. I'm going to be made of. But, is that exactly true? I don't know. But to me, it could have been humility. But if he's in a crowd of people and I'm trying to touch the hem of the garment, I might get stepped on. But I think there was some significance to the hem of the garment. But when these folks saw that fringe on other people, and let's get back to our scribes here, it was to remind them of the Lord's commandments and not to follow their own thinking. Remember all of God's commandments. But notice, we were discussing this Friday night at the house. Do we need reminding today? Really, Andy? You think? Me?
I think we absolutely reminded.
Really? Now notice Deuteronomy chapter 4. This is the nation of Israel now who had been brought out of 400 years of Egyptian bondage. They knew what they'd been through. They knew that they had crossed the Red Sea and there's walls of water apparently on both sides of them. The Egyptian army was drowned. They knew that the Lord had fed them for years and years there. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 9, Moses, the Lord telling Moses, only take heed to yourself, folks, and keep your soul diligently. Why? Lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, unless they depart from your heart all the days of your life. These people would forget that.
Don't we forget things today, Ricky?
Not me. Yeah, I do.
Do you forget to pray often?
Yes.
Do you forget to thank God for the blessing of the rain outside?
Yes.
Do you forget to thank God for the word of God that you read this morning?
Absolutely.
Yes, we need to be reminded of things.
Yeah, we need to be reminded. These folks needed to be reminded of that. That they've just come through all that. And they, as human beings, don't just Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 10, this is warning those folks now. Folks, when you get to the promised land, it's going to be when the Lord your God has brought you into that land which he swore to your fathers, which he promised to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob to give to you. He's going to give you great and goodly cities. You didn't build those cities. And he's going to give you houses full of all good things which you didn't buy. You didn't build the house. You didn't buy all the stuff in the house. He's going to give you wells that you didn't dig, vineyards and olive trees which you didn't plant. And when you've eaten and you've got yourself full, then beware, verse 12, lest thou forget the Lord which brought you out of Egypt. They would forget that. They would need to be reminded. I don't need to be reminded today. Yeah, I do.
That was the land they had to work for too. God just didn't give it to them.
No, they had to fight for it.
It says that David took over 7 nations out of that place and run them out and divided the land among the brethren of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
They had to fight for it.
They had to fight for it, but when they got there, all the good stuff was there.
Did I say David? I meant Joshua.
Joshua, yes. Yeah. Pat, was you going to say something?
Yeah. The way I have to remember, the way I can do it is by making habits. I read every day.
Mm-hmm.
I have a habitual, and that is the way I can remember
Sure.
every day. If
Sure.
it wasn't for that,
We get so busy with things in life, we forget what's really important. Yeah, we're busy doing stuff. None of it amounts to anything. None of it matters.
If God was too busy to forget the blessings that he gave you yesterday,
Well,
where would you be today?
whew, very bad shape. Very bad shape. And we were discussing Friday night, I think it was, maybe last, I don't know. The importance of the Lord's Supper. We partake of that on the first day of every week. Folks, I need that probably every day. But the Lord saw fit to remind somebody like me of what is really important in my life by observing this memorial feast, to do this in remembrance of me as often as you do it. I need to do that probably every day. Apparently they did it on the first day of the week. They observed the Sabbath day. Every Sabbath day. Wonder why? Because they're people just like us, and they need to be reminded. Even these people who came out of the Egyptian bondage and crossed the Red Sea and did all those things. The Lord showed them all those things. And they're going to forget the Lord, David.
I think it's interesting, we take the Lord's Supper because it is a covenant. Jesus said it's a covenant, and it's for us to remember Him. And in so many aspects
Yes.
of Him. But it's also, a covenant is also, it's between two parties.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, who's the covenant between? It's between God's church, His people,
Mm-hmm.
and Him.
Yeah.
Or the Lord and Him.
Right.
And so, I know I'm maybe getting off topic, but it's also when we take this Lord's Supper, which we'll do this morning, it's a communal thing. It's an individual thing.
Yes.
But we're not to do it at our own home. We're to come together
Mm-hmm.
and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And God sees that
Mm-hmm.
when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
And He also remembers His covenant.
Yes.
It's a reminder to us of Jesus
Mm-hmm.
and His sacrifice, but it's also a reminder to God of His covenant and the covenant people that He established.
And that's true.
And what He's done. Just like maybe an example of this would be when God set a rainbow in the cloud. That was a sign, a symbol of a covenant. And it wasn't a reminder, it is a reminder for us. We can see a rainbow and know now that that's God's promise. He will never destroy this world with blood. But what God specifically said about that, Genesis chapter 9, verse 14, He says, "It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud." Verse 15, "And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And the water shall never come to destroy all flesh. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant."
Mm-hmm. Would the Lord actually forget? Probably not. But yeah, that rainbow was there
No.
to remind Him.
But it is, that's what he said. It is
Oh,
a
yes.
reminder.
And that's a good point.
Yeah,
But do I need reminded?
absolutely.
Ooh, yeah. Every day. Every day. Every day in His wisdom, He tells me, when we come together, let's remember what we're here for, not specifically on this first day of the week in this particular building, but every day, what needs to be important in my life, And as we go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, when you get there, well, all them people ain't going to get there, remember? Who went into the land of Canaan, the promised land? 2 people that started out, Joshua and Caleb. And so we're going to say, well, it was their descendants. They're not the ones who saw. But if you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 20, when your son asks you in time to come, say, what does these testimonies and statutes and judgments which the Lord our God has commanded you? And you're going to tell them, well, we were favored bondmen. Tell them the history. Tell them what we came through, what we went through. I wasn't here during the Holocaust. I wasn't here during the time of World War II. It's been rehearsed. I've been told all about those things. I think I understand that. I didn't go through that, but I think I understand it and remember it. But notice, if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17, the prior verses to that pretty much says the same thing that we read in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 17. And you're going to say in your heart, well, by the power and the might of my hand, I've got all this stuff. I did all this myself. No, remember where this come from. Remember, you didn't do this. The Lord blessed you with this. And we're people just like they were. We're the same old people. We need reminded.
Ricky David said in Psalms 105 and verse 5, "Remember His marvelous works and what He has done.
Yes.
His wonders, His judgment, His mouth, which He favor His servant," so forth and so on. But remember His marvelous works. I know I'm strange, and I got a bird feeder outside of my bedroom window. And I get up every morning while I'm studying, I read there at the desk, and I look out the window, I see the red bird, or a little chickadee bird. It reminds me that God takes care of the birds, how much He takes care of me.
Mm-hmm.
We need daily reminders. Those squirrels that eat out of your patio out there that you feed corn to, those are God's creatures.
Yeah.
God takes care of them.
Yeah.
Not only that, every time you drive by this building, and this building is not sacred, I'm not saying it is. Do you think about the church
Sometimes.
sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
When you drive by a religious sign and see a marquee on a denomination building, do you think about what it says?
Yeah.
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 We need to be reminded of God's daily, and we need it daily because we get so complacent.
We get so busy too. We're just so busy. You know, we're like ants and bees. We're just so busy, but none of it amounts to nothing. Actually, when it comes right down to it, what's the most important? What's the priority in our life? And sometimes we forget that.
Ecclesiastes writer
summed
it up best. After all of the things that Solomon looked at,
It's all vanity, every bit of it. Well, let's go back. Anyone have any comment?
You know, you said back a woman a while ago that was being touched by Jesus' garment.
Yes.
Well, you know, all the healing that Jesus did, the fellow sick or the person sick, and Jesus was involved. They was close by.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they was like when they healed a blind man, Jesus was there with him.
Mm-hmm.
When the people had the sores on them, they was Jesus blessed them and they was healed of leprosy.
Right.
But I think of an instance where Jesus wasn't really involved with the person or being there with him. And let's see, John. I think it's John the 4th chapter where this fellow came to Jesus and said, "My son is sick, would you go home with me and heal him?"
Right.
Jesus said, "Go thy way, your son is healed."
Mm-hmm.
Jesus never seen that boy.
No.
But when the man got home, the people came and went and met him and said, "Your son has been healed." He said, "What hour was that?" He said, I think the 7th hour or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus thought that was when he spoke words for the boy to be healed. So
Right.
that was an instance where Jesus never met the customer or whatever, the person.
Yeah. Okay.
He just spoke words and the boy was healed.
Right. Yeah. But that man had a lot of faith that Jesus could do that. He had a lot of faith that Jesus could do that. He, speak the word only, and my son could be healed. And of course, as you said, he was. Well, let's go back to our scribe. Go with me to Matthew chapter 23 now, if you would. These people, these scribes enlarged the borders of their garments, and I'm thinking that he's talking about the fringes on their garment. Notice Matthew chapter 23 in verse 5, but all their works, the scribes of the Pharisees, they do what they do to be seen of men. Here's the 2 examples. They made broad their phylacteries, and they enlarged the borders of their garments. Y'all see my long garment I've got on today? Pat sewed new fringes on my garments yesterday. Mine are fresh, pretty blue. They're longer. Look at this thing Burnell's got on. He needs to wash the thing. But Edgar, look at my tassels. That means something to me because I've got some nice, pretty long ones on mine, and I need y'all to notice mine. Forget about God's word, Pat.
Some are that way with the church buildings.
Well, possibly so, but my fringes are better than yours. They're longer. They're a deeper blue. They're newer. They enlarge the borders of their garments. Look at my fringes, David.
Well, isn't that just their Sunday best?
No.
It's different.
Do what now?
So that's different than their Sunday best?
No, that's the way they do. They won't, when they're out in the streets, the marketplace, that's my rabbi over there. Look at the way he's dressed. That's my rabbi. Look at his fringes.
What that amounts to is immodesty. If by the way
Lack
you
of
dress-
humility. Yeah.
If by the way you dress, almost by definition, immodesty is trying to draw attention to yourself
Yeah.
by the way your outward appearance is.
Yes.
It could be with the lack of clothing, or it could be, in this case,
Yeah.
with the ornate and the phylacteries and the broad to draw attention. So
That-
yes, it's humility, but it's also immodest.
Yes, but I mean, that's what Jesus said in Matthew 23. What they do, those broad fringes, is to be seen of men.
Right.
Look at me. Look at 1 Peter chapter 3.
Well,
Yeah.
all the men back there, and I don't know what women, they all wore a garment, they call it, a garment. That was one of their dress.
The women, what, say it again?
I say, all the men back then, whether they was whatever they were, lawyers, whatever, they all wore a low robe.
Right.
Even Jesus wore a robe.
Yes.
Because, but in other words, I'm not saying they had to be a certain length, but to be recognized, for them to be recognized, that's the way I look at that.
I think what we read in Numbers chapter 15, that commandment was for all of them, for every generation that was to follow that lived under the old law. I don't get that it was just for the scribes and the Pharisees. It was to command all the people, the nation of Israel. And when I see Edgar's fringe on his robe, that reminds me of not to look at Edgar, but to remind me of this God's commandments. Remind me to what God told me to be doing today.
Yeah.
And you can see it every day. And I don't think it was just a Sunday best day, but this was something they wore every day to remind them.
I think we have done
Okay?
that by our dress.
Well, we're fixing to talk about that. Andy, you're going to say something. We're fixing to talk. Where's Peter chapter 3?
Before you, Matthew chapter 6, Jesus addressed that. It said, take heed that you know your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them, otherwise you have your reward in heaven. When you go into the trumpet, don't sound your trumpet. But down in verse 5, it says, when you pray, you should not be like the hypocrites, when they love to pray standing in the synagogues and the court street, that they may be seen by men. I sure I say that they have their reward. Jesus addressed that type of attitude there in Matthew chapter 6.
To all of us. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 3, our adorning, the way we look, the way we dress, women and men, not just women, women and men, don't let it be the outward adorning. Cole, how's my hair look today? I know I need a haircut. Hopefully this week we'll get a haircut. Do I need to worry? I realize I need to comb my hair. Believe it or not, I tried to comb it this morning. But does my emphasis need to be on my hair?
It be on the quiet and spirit of the heart.
We're fixing to go there. So our hair, the wearing of gold. You see people who have all the gold and the chains and the necklaces and what putting on of apparel. We need to be nicely dressed, decently dressed, cleanly dressed, modestly dressed. But can we overdo it sometimes with my hairdo and my gold chains and all my gold and jewelry and the dress? Now notice verse 5. Instead of doing that, let it be the hidden man of the heart. Can y'all see my heart this morning? You notice my heart? You notice my hairstyle and all my gold and
I know Ricky's heart because I know Ricky. I know his attitude.
You can't see it though.
But I can see it by your actions.
Okay, but
I can see it by your kindness and your humility. I can see it by your knowledge.
If I had all this, the real fancy hairdo,
Don't let it
this
be
is about as fancy as it gets now.
Don't let it be.
Somebody in my family's told me I've had this hairdo all my life, and I have. I've got pictures of me when I was like this, and I've still got the same old hairdo. Well, it's good enough. I don't know how else. What can I do with the mess?
Let me ask you a question. You helped me move a trailer, and I crawled under as a pair of overalls and cleaned out all muddy and dirty. Would you want me to pull a bit like that this morning? That same for the clothes on?
Oh, that would be fine. You remember when folks here in the old building used to show up in their overalls?
Yeah.
Yeah. white shirt, ironed, the pair of blue bibbed overalls.
What's wrong with that?
Not one thing. But we've got past that, and it's okay. But sometimes I see members of the church who show up we're a little bit overdressed. And, you know, just yeah. And Wade, when I think of women with makeup, there's a member of the church, and I won't say where, I think she's still living. That woman, she put it on with a putty knife. She was the preacher's wife. And she looked awful. She just looked awful. But anyway, let's get back to this. Verse 4, let it be the hidden man of the heart. Forget about the outward. Let it be the adorning notices of a meek and a quiet spirit. You know, look at my tassels on my robe. Look at me. Look now. When you see me in the market, see me at Walmart, holler, hey, Rabbi. It needs to be the meek and a quiet spirit. Notice this, meek and a quiet spirit, which is the sight of God of great price. Is God impressed with my fringes?
No.
What if Andy, I've got this huge gold cross, this gold, big one. The Lord's impressed with that.
You know where it is with my little small one? I got a
Really?
little small, I got a little tiny one.
Do y'all remember, and Pat can testify to this, it used to be illegal for a woman to wear a small cross. A small cross.
Christ.
You know, when we grew up, you didn't wear crosses. That cross up there would not do.
If that cross serves to remind me of the
Yeah, I know.
sacrifice of Calvary, there's nothing. It is not an idol of worship.
No.
It is not an idol. It is not a sanctum vessel of a temple or anything like that.
I understand. I agree.
But a religious reminder is no problem.
No. We've had both.
If you walk in my office and my screensaver's on, you may see crosses. You may see the replica of the cross. And you may see a scripture go across.
Mm-hmm.
Is that wrong?
No.
No.
No. We've had folks here who didn't want to sing the old rugged cross because we're worshiping the cross. We're not worshiping the cross. But that's just, we get a little, we strain at too many gnats. Too many gnats. We're so busy worried about that cross there, we don't have time for what's really wrong. We're going to argue over this cross.
But if I look
That's
at that cross
silly.
or see that cross, it reminds me of what my Lord did on the Calvary.
Yeah.
That's a remembrance of the sacrifice, of what He did for me. That's not a worshiping of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to the apparel thing just a moment.
Okay.
And I'm going to borrow a quote from Willis Ferris. And it's something that always stuck with me. He said, son, if you're going to stand in the pulpit, at least represent yourself the best you can. If you go into a wedding, you're going to put a tie and jacket on? Sure you are. If you're going to the pulpit, you're going to put a tie and jacket on? You're going to put your best there.
Yes.
If you wait on the Lord's table, you're going to go up there in flip-flops and T-shirts when you could have been moderately dressed. You're going to represent yourself the best you can, not egotistically, not boastful, not proud, but you're going to put on the best you can because you're coming to serve God.
Right.
And
I agree.
Always dress appropriately. It's not what you've got on, it's the thought of the heart. It's how you approach the attitude.
Yes.
Whether it's overalls or t-shirts or a necktie, whatever the case may be. It's not pretentious. It's a sincerity of doing the best I can to serve my master.
I'm afraid sometimes we, men and women, we spend more time getting ready to go to the church building than we do preparing ourselves to what we're going to do at the church building.
Amen.
And so, we need the meek and the quiet spirit, which is in God's eyes. God knows, God can see my heart. He don't care about this long fringe that I have. He don't care about this big gold cross that covers up most of my chest. He don't see all that. He's looking at my heart. A meek and a quiet spirit, which is God's eyes of great price. If something is costly, it's usually rare. Usually rare. You don't see it much. In God's eyes, that quiet and humble spirit is of great value in God's eyes. He don't care about the fringe that I have on, but I want y'all to see it. So look at my fringe. Look at the big cross that I have, the big gold cross here. Look at me. That was the problem with the scribes. about this big old cross that I've got on. I wore it for a purpose so that you would see me and my big old cross.
So you would think I was religious.
And of course I am with this big old cross. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
That big old cross makes you faithful, Richard.
Yeah, I know it. But that's the purpose of it. That's the reason people wear it today. I'm afraid. I've seen people with that. You know, what Jesus is telling us here, you know, going back to Matthew chapter 23, he called the apostles hypocrites 7 or 8 times. You can pick out the hypocrite by what they've got on, what they're wearing as symbols of religious piety, if you would. And they're no more religious and pious than the dog or the cat that might be running around there. That's the problem with those types of folks. And we of course, we've still got them today. We still have them in the church today. Well, apparently they can't see themselves before because of
Read Matthew 23:27. You're there.
23 and 27. What'd you say, Andy? I'm not there.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're like whitewashed tombs, which do indeed beautifully appear outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones. Something to that effect.
It looks good on the outside, Andy. Look too good. No. And the Lord's looking on the inside. He's looking at our heart, this meek and quiet spirit. He don't care about that gold cross I got around my neck. But I do. And I need to be aware of that too. Notice Matthew chapter 23 and verse 7. We're out of time already. 23 and verse 7. We'll just sort of talk about this, and we'll pick up here next week. They love greetings in the markets. They love to be called of men rabbi. What's rabbi mean? Teachers? Teacher. Do you know that the name rabbi did not occur until about the time of Christ? You don't find rabbi in the Old Testament. Andy, I need as a class teacher, I need a title other than plain old teacher, you know.
Scholar.
The what?
Scholar.
Scholar. Well, that sounds a little bit, think of something that, would make me look humble and yet important. Reverend.
Preacher.
We got Reverend Andy.
No, you don't.
We don't?
No, sir.
Why do people today need religious titles? Religious titles.
There is one part in Scripture.
Well, look at what he says here. Verse 8, he's talking to his followers, his disciples. And be not you called rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ. All of y'all are just brethren. Verse 9, call no man father upon the earth. You have but one Father which is in heaven. Neither be called masters, for one is your master. And yet we have people today who absolutely have to have religious titles. And you remember, maybe we used to have an apostle out in town. He was the apostle, reverend, most holy. It'd take up the whole page to type out his title. And I guess the apostle was maybe a step or two above reverend. I don't know. But, where'd he get all these titles? Just give it to himself, I guess. I don't know. Do we need to refer to our preachers as reverend? Reverend, come on, Andy. Let's move into the 21st century.
Not this one, you're not.
Reverend.
I actually prefer the word evangelist or minister.
Okay.
Or preacher.
Okay. Yeah, preacher is not much to a preacher.
It's just personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
I know the word apostle is not really in fashion. Was Barnabas an apostle? He was called an Barnabas.
He was called an apostle.
He was not one of the 12.
No, he wasn't, but he was called an apostle.
Why was he called an apostle?
Because he was out there teaching and preaching.
What does the word apostle mean?
One sent.
What are we to be doing?
We're out there teaching and preaching.
We've all been sent, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's a term that it's just not used in our modern language, but is it wrong in and of itself if somebody chooses to use that term I think it is, if it really is based on their heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why does he call himself an apostle? He feels like he has been sent to go out and teach the gospel. Well, do you need that? Do you need to use that term? But no words. But I don't know. You know, I think it just depends on the person and what's inside. What's the heart.
Okay, well, our definition of an apostle, of course, is one who was an eyewitness of the resurrected Christ.
But Barnabas was not that.
Well, did he see Christ after he was resurrected? Barnabas.
He was chosen.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
He was seen above 500 at one time. Was Barnabas in that group? I don't know. I have no idea. But that's our definition. Would I want to be called an apostle today?
Not you. No, not you.
No,
Not you.
not me. No.
Yeah.
No, I would shrink away from being called the class teacher here. I really would. I'm very thankful that they allow me to try to teach the class. And that's about it. But as far as referring to me as the teacher,
Okay, let's go
I
to
don't need
Ephesians
that.
4. Let's go to Ephesians 4 verse 11. I know I'm on your time.
yeah, I know. Well,
And he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, and some teachers. 3 reasons. For the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry, and for the edifying of the body of Christ, so all come into unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a complete or perfect man, the stature of the fullness thereof.
mm-hmm. Have we arrived at that point?
No.
But we have the full gospel of Christ. We have the full gospel word. Do we need an apostle today to confirm what's been written? No. No. Notice Psalms 111. I know we're a little bit over time, but we've got a little time here. So Psalms 111. People refer to them. And God hath commanded His covenant forever, and holy and reverend is His name. God's name is holy, and God's name is reverend. But Edgar, mine is too. Mine's the same as God's. His name is holy and reverend. Oh no, my name's not holy and reverend. We're all brethren. We're all the same.
Where were you at in Psalms?
Psalms 111 and verse 9. Psalm 111 and verse 9. God's name is reverend.
Holy and awesome. Okay.
Well, yours says awesome. Okay. But He's given him a name that's above all names, huh? His name is reverend, but look, mine is too. Well, my name is equal with God's name. My name is above all other names. No, it's not. We need to be humble. We need to be humble and have that meek and that quiet spirit about us. We're out of time. We're past time. Next week we'll just take up. Go ahead.
They so-called preachers today does just like they added those extra links to be recognized.
Yes.
You see a sign on the highway that says Netherton Preacher Reverend
Right.
Smith.
Right.
Has all them big names first,
Right.
and his last name.
Right.
Smith is like that. People recognize him as a great teacher or a preacher.
Right.
I've seen that word 3 or 4 different names before the man's name
Yeah.
of a congregation.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've just done that themselves.
Yeah.
Just added that themselves. For some reason, we just got to have a title. Spiritually, we just got to have it. I've enjoyed the class. Thank you for your help this morning.